What's going on, movie fans? My name is Michael Weer. I like talking about movies, and June of 2024 has come to an end, and I saw most of the movies that I planned on seeing. There was one movie that eluded me in the month of June, and that is Horizon, an American Saga. Really wanted a chance to go out and see this movie, but it's over 3 hours long, and I just didn't have the time. Well, it's 3 hours and 1 minute, but you get the point. It's a 3 hour long movie, and I just didn't have the time in the last week to go see it, and I thought about waiting till next week to see it, and I probably will, but I didn't want to wait on this video because June has come to an end. We're already talking about July movies. So before I get to any of my July reviews, I wanted to give you guys a solid best worst of June 2024 list. So I am admitting that I'm leaving Horizon, an American Saga off of this list, but I do have 8 more movies to talk about. But you guys know that it's not just about my list, it's also about yours. I would love to know how you would rank June of 2024. So if you saw more than one movie, let me know in the comment section down below what your favorite movie was, what the worst movie was to you, and then if you've got a list, I'd love to see that too. It's just fun comparing lists. Nobody's list is perfect, except maybe mine, but no, seriously, nobody's list is perfect, and I would love to know what yours is. Finally, before getting into the list, guys, if this is the first time you're finding my channel and you like movie reviews, movie content, whether it's quick reactions out of theaters or Blu-ray talk, because I've got over 1,200 Blu-rays back there. It's just way too many at this point. But if you like that kind of content, well, I've got all of that on my channel, and I would invite you to subscribe to my channel and check out more of the content on that channel. And I've said channel way too many times. Let's just get into my June 2024 best to worst list. All right, guys, coming in at number 8, we have The Exorcism. And The Exorcism is a movie that I was really excited for because last year we got a movie called The Pope's Exorcist that starred Russell Crowe, and I didn't have any hope for that movie, but Russell Crowe's performance was so fun in that movie that even though it was basically every horror trope you get in an exorcism-style movie, Russell Crowe's character carried that movie on his back, and I was like, okay, I'm interested in seeing Russell Crowe in more exorcism movies, and sure enough, about a month ago, we got a trailer for The Exorcism, and we were told, hey, this is coming out in June. So I got kind of excited because I was like, while this isn't connected to Pope's Exorcist, there's a possibility that Russell Crowe will bring his A game again and carry the tropes of The Exorcism on his back. Now, when this movie started out, I thought, hey, this might be one of the better movies this month because it starts on a haunted movie set, and I love any time a horror movie can mix up the horror genre. Like, you've seen so many exorcism movies before. You had The Exorcism of Emily Rose that was in a courtroom for most of the movie. I liked how that mixed up the genre quite a bit. So this movie starts on a haunted movie set, and I thought that is such a cool idea. And the demon keeps killing off the actor that's hired to play the priest. I thought that's a really neat concept. But unfortunately, once you get out of that first act, it just jumps into every exorcism trope. It almost completely leaves behind the fact that they were on a haunted movie set, and it just doesn't make any sense. You've got Russell Crowe's character doing things that are just incredibly weird, and everybody around him's just like, he must be drinking alcohol again. Yeah, that's why he's levitating across the room. I'm sure it's the alcohol. Seriously, it just didn't make any sense. And then at one point, he's in a window, and he just does a swan dive out the window, and his daughter runs over, and she screams. And you're like, oh man, I can't believe the demon did that to him. Nope, in the next scene, he's just back at the movie set. And you're like, well, then what'd she scream at? It's like they found 2 different movies and they meshed them together, and neither one worked when they were put together. Like, I like the haunted movie set. I also liked the idea of the demon going after whoever was playing the priest. Like, he was so mad at the Bible and Jesus and priests in general that he was willing to do any of that. And you just had other characters in this movie that were so irritating, and the movie was just a mess. It's not a movie I recommend to anybody. It's not a movie I'll go back to. It's currently toward the very bottom of my horror movies for 24 list, and I will be shocked if anything is worse than The Exorcism this year. At number 7, guys, is a little bit of a cheat because this movie technically came out at the very end of May, but I didn't see it till the first week of June, so I threw it on my June ranked list, and it is Garfield. In the movie Garfield, Chris Pratt voices Garfield, and Samuel Jackson voices Garfield's dad. And honestly, that was the only part of the movie that really worked for me. I liked Garfield and his dad. The emotional beats that they had, Garfield's dad sort of watching him through the years, making slash marks in the tree every time he saw his son, and Garfield coming to that realization that he was never really abandoned. His dad just wanted him to have a better life than he could have provided for him. I thought that was sweet. I thought it was emotional. I thought it worked. But that said, the rest of the movie didn't really work for me. It's not an animated movie that I think I will go back to very much. My kids liked it. I don't think any of them loved it. And that's a big selling point for animated movies for me now, because I know I'm not the target audience for animated movies, but my kids definitely are. And again, they had an enjoyable time with it, but none of them were talking about it the next day. None of them were quoting it the next day. It was just sort of a movie that happened for them. And I'm glad I got the chance to go take them to that. And they did laugh throughout the movie, but again, didn't leave any sort of an impact. So that's why I'm ranking it so low on this list. At number 6, guys, is a movie that I thought when I saw it would be the worst movie of the month, and it is The Watchers. The Watchers is directed by Ishana Shyamalan, which is M. Night Shyamalan's daughter, and wow, this movie is a mess, because it starts pretty intriguing. It starts like most M. Night Shyamalan movies. It starts intriguing. It's got an interesting build-up. You get a girl who gets lost out in a forest. She runs into these people who are also stuck inside of this forest. They have a little shelter, and in this shelter there's a two-way mirror for one of the walls, and you have to stand in front of it. You can't see out, but whatever's in the forest is looking in. So throughout the duration of this movie, they're trying to figure out what these things are, why they're watching them, why they are being watched, who are the watchers is the main question, and then of course, how do we get out of this forest? And again, the first act, a lot of great setup. The second act, I thought it was decent enough. They had some interesting plot lines sort of intersect with each other for the characters. I thought that there's an explanation for what these things are, and I liked the monsters that are in the forest, what they were. I don't think those have been used in movies enough, so I thought that was pretty cool. But the way they mishandled the ending of this movie is horrible. The third act of this movie is a big mess. Like, they tried to show how the main character is a lot like the things in the woods, and they tried to give it an emotional story, but their own logic, their own lore, none of that makes sense when you just take a step back and look at it. And there's even a moment toward the end of the movie where you have Dakota Fanning in a house, and she's in this house with one of these things, and you're like, oh, that is an interesting twist. I wonder where they're going to go with this. Oh, it's going to be very disappointing. Okay. And it just doesn't go anywhere that you want it to go. Like, you've been seeing this build up for this movie. You've seen these horrifying creatures. What are you going to do with this thing? And then you're just like, everything deserves a chance. And you're like, what? No, that's not what the rest of the movie was saying at all. So if I found out one day that M. Night Shyamalan had a bigger hand in this than like his daughter did, it won't surprise me at all, because a lot of his movies have been going that way these days. Like, it'll start real strong, it'll start really interesting, they'll cut great trailers, just get to that third act and it just falls apart. M. Night has not had a great third act in a long time, maybe since The Visit, maybe since Split. I'm not sure which one came first, but you get the idea. With that said, guys, let's move on to number 5. At number 5 is a Netflix released movie called Hitman, and Hitman stars Glenn Powell as a guy who works for the police. He's not a police officer, but he works adjacent to them. Basically, he poses as a hitman for people online who are trying to hire a hitman. He'll make some sort of a deal with this person online, and as soon as they turn over the money in person for him to commit the hitman job, well, the police rush in, and they arrest that person, and they take them away and say, hey, you were trying to have somebody taken out. So I thought that that was an interesting setup for the movie, and honestly, seeing Glenn Powell in this movie and all the different disguises and all the different ways that he transformed into whatever kind of person they were looking for online, I thought that was really neat. I thought that was really well done. So it's a decent enough setup, and I was having a decent enough time with it until we get into some things that are a little spoilery. So since the movie's been out on Netflix for a month, I'm going to go ahead and talk about spoilers here. If you don't want to know spoilers, just move forward to my number 4 pick. But here we go. Where the movie started to lose me was he falls for this lady who's trying to hire a hitman to kill her husband. He feels bad for her. She's really pretty. And he's like, you know what? Just go away. You don't want to do this, so she doesn't get caught. But then she ends up killing her husband herself. And then he tries to cover for her because they're getting into a romantic relationship together. And then together they both kill a sort of corrupt police officer. And the movie just expects you to be okay with that. And I guess, on the one hand, you could just watch this movie as a comedy and be like, oh, crazy stuff happens. But the movie's not a straightforward comedy. It's sort of a romantic comedy. And so it's supposed to have some dramatic layers to it. And you're supposed to feel for these characters. But I didn't really feel bad for either of these characters. In fact, the person I felt the worst for was the police officer that they decided to kill together because he figured out that they were covering up a murder. That was who I felt bad for. I mean, at the end, they're just like, oh, he was a racist pig. He was a bad guy. But you never saw that stuff from him. He wasn't like the best guy. He was kind of a scumbag, but he was an undercover agent police officer guy, and he it had some dark layers to him. So there was never a moment in the movie where I was like, man, I hate that guy. And because they never gave you that, or at least gave that to me, so by the time you get to the end of this movie and they're like, hey, let's take this guy out, put a bag over his head, and then we're going to just get away with this whole thing, and it's going to be great. We'll just say he had a heart attack. Let's make out in front of him, and then the scene will cut to black. And I was like, I didn't feel emotionally attached to anybody in this film, and I definitely didn't feel attached to them to the point where I was okay with them getting away with murder. I guess at the end of the day, it is just a movie, but if you're going to go down that dark path, it either needs to be a lot funnier, so I'm just excusing it because it's funny for the sake of comedy, or it needs to be more layered, and I should have seen some darker tones from that police officer so that I didn't feel bad for his situation at the end of the film, because I ended up leaving the film like, I didn't really like those two characters very much, and because I don't like those characters, I'm probably not going to go back to it in the future. Although since I put it over the watchers, I guess I like those characters more than anybody in that movie. Let's move on. At number 4, guys, we have another animated film, and this one is Inside Out 2. And again, this was a really good movie. I would say from here on out, they're all movies I would watch again. But Inside Out 2, again, because it's animated and I'm really there for my kids, and my kids did love this movie, and it is one that they've quoted, I thought that Inside Out 2 was very well done, but I didn't love it as much as the first movie. And I've heard a lot of back and forth on this. I've heard some people say that they like it more than the first movie, and I've heard other people say they like it less than the first movie. I do land in the camp of those who liked it less than the first movie, because I think, and this is just what I think, is the first movie connected with me more because my kids are still very small, 7, 8, 9. They're not to that teenage status yet where they are dealing with those teenage issues in Inside Out 2. Now, we've all been teenagers before, us adults, and so I guess I could sort of relate to the character in that way, but again, it just didn't stick with me the way that the first one did. I feel like the first one really tugged at my heartstrings because I have kids who are leaving that toddler stage, going into being little kids before they get to being teenagers. Like, they're still in that stage, and so the first movie really pulled at me, whereas the second movie didn't really do that to me. The second movie was more of just like, hey, so this is what teenagers go through. Now, eventually, one day, my kids become teenagers. If we rewatch this movie, it may be something that I relate to down the line. But overall, I had an enjoyable time with it. But like I said, it was a fun movie, very quotable movie. We've gone back and forth throughout the house with some of the different things. Like, we'll walk around the house going, oh, I'm really glad I ran into you guys. So again, there's some things to take away from this movie that were fun. Me and my kids liked it, my wife. We all enjoyed this movie together. So Inside Out 2 is number 4. Again, I'm going to always put animated movies lower. It's going to be rare that you're going to see them in my top 3. It's just how it is. Now, before we get into the top 3, guys, it's time for me to have a little bit of Pure Leaf tea. Pure Leaf tea. They don't sponsor me, but they should. All right, guys, at number 3 is the third movie in a franchise, and that is A Quiet Place Day One. Now, this is a movie that I didn't love and I didn't hate. I'm somewhere in the middle on it because I love the idea of a one-off story within the Quiet Place universe. I was all right with it. Overall, a couple days later after I've seen this movie, almost a week after I've seen this movie, I've been thinking about it and I'm like, yeah, I do enjoy that self-contained story of what would you do if you didn't have very long to live anyway and there was an alien invasion. You would go and make priorities out of living your life to the fullest in those last couple days anyway, regardless of an alien attack. So while it tackled an interesting storyline within this terrifying alien invasion universe, the movie didn't give you any new substance to the Quiet Place universe. And that did bother me because the movie was, I think, an hour and 40 minutes long. And so you get this self-contained story within the Quiet Place universe. But because they gave you this self-contained story, you didn't get anything else to expand this universe. And it's been, 2 years since we've gotten a Quiet Place movie. And so I just wanted more. I wanted more out of this thing. It said Quiet Place Day One. So I thought, okay, you're going to get to see the invasion from a different point of view. You're going to get to see it from New York City this time. And maybe you'll get to see a bigger spacecraft. Maybe you'll understand why they're there, what they're there for. But instead, you don't get any of that. Instead, you get maybe one little Easter egg. I mean Easter egg on purpose, but they break open an egg-like structure and they're eating out of it. And that's really the only new thing you see these aliens do. It doesn't really go into any depth as to why they're there, why they're on Earth, what they're going to do there. But again, I've got this at number 3, so I didn't hate the movie. It's a movie that I think was fine. not sure how often I'll go back to it. If I want to watch a Quiet Place movie, I'm probably going back to Quiet Place 2, or Quiet Place 1. Both have great actors in them, both have some great moments in them. And while this movie did have some good moments and some great acting, it's just a self-contained story that I'm not sure how often I'll go back to in the future. That'll lead me to number 2, guys, and my number 2 pick for the month of June is The Bike Riders. And I'll be honest with you, going into June, I thought this was going to be my number 1 movie. I really did. It's got Tom Hardy, it's got Austin Butler, it's got Jodie Comer. I thought all 3 of them were going to bring their A game, and they pretty much do. But the story itself is a little bit boring. You get this movie about these bike riders, but it's told from Jodie Comer's point of view. And so Jodie Comer is telling this story, but it's like she's not in the biker club. So she's only telling the greatest hits of the biker club. Now, you're getting to see some really fun moments of these bikers in their biker club, but I feel like because you're not living and breathing with the bikers themselves, like Austin Butler's not telling the story, Tom Hardy's not telling the story, so because of that, you don't get to see any of them live their lives. And I said this in my review, and I'll say it again, I'm not necessarily looking to watch them live their lives all the time, but like Tom Hardy's character is supposed to be a truck driver, and there's another character that's supposed to be an electrician, and it would have been cool to see them live their lives so that when dramatic things happen, you feel a little bit more attached to them. But because you're not feeling attached to them, because you're not really living with them, you're just seeing their greatest hits, when dramatic moments happen, you're just kind of like, no, all right, that's fine. All right, let's move on and see what else is going on with these bikers. At least that's how I felt. So again, the movie wasn't bad, but it did come off a little bit boring because you just didn't ever feel emotionally invested in any of these bikers. But with that said, I did make it number 2 because I think that it has more rewatchability. It's not a movie that I'm necessarily going to throw on the shelves back there right away, but it is a movie that I think that I would watch again in the future. It's a movie I want to show my wife. She might have a different appreciation for it. She might really like it. So I think I put it at number 2 because I think it does have a little bit of rewatchability to it, but I don't know if my problems with this movie are going to change one way or the other on a repeat viewing. And that'll lead me to number 1, my favorite movie for the month of June. This is the best movie in June and one of my favorite movies for 2024 so far, and it is Bad Boys Ride or Die. Bad Boys Ride or Die brings back Will Smith and Martin Lawrence as Mike and Marcus, coming back being bad boys on the streets of Miami. But what this movie does differently from the rest of the franchise is it actually flips it and has them as the wanted fugitives. They get set up for something that you know, because you're watching the movie, that they didn't do. They've been set up, but now they have these street gangs coming for them, they have the law enforcement people coming for them, and they have the, we'll just call them the ultimate bad guys in this movie coming for them. So I thought the story was unique to the Bad Boys franchise, kind of mixed it up quite a bit, but then you have how hilarious this movie was. You have these incredible action scenes that rival John Wick, and yes, John Wick is the bar, so if you're going to talk about action scenes in action movies, you got to look at John Wick and be like, is it better or worse than that? And I feel like it's right on par, if not better than some of them, because there's a couple scenes in this movie that are absolutely that badass. I won't go into them here. Watch my full review if you want to know exactly what those scenes are, or just watch the movie because I think you will enjoy it. One last thing to point out about Bad Boys was the camera work, and that's not something I go into enough on my channel, but the camera work in this movie in some of the action scenes is phenomenal. There's a really cool point of view shot between Marcus and Mike as they're walking through this abandoned warehouse, and there's another point where Marcus is out of ammo. He says, "I'm out." Will Smith throws him the gun. Well, you follow that gun in the air as it turns. It lands in Marcus's hand, and he takes the shot, and it is an incredible shot. I think it was the money shot in the trailer as well, but it is awesome in the movie. And that's not just it. There's a couple of drone shots that are done really well throughout this movie, and I thought overall, while the movie had a few flaws to it, this movie was far and away the best movie that I saw in June of 2024. And guys, that's my list of June from worst to best. If you saw any of these movies, I'd love to know your opinions. Maybe we agree or disagree on them. And like I said at the beginning of this video, if you've got a list, well, I'd love to know how you rank June of 24 from worst to best. So throw that in the comment section as well. Finally, guys, if you like this video and you want to watch more, don't forget to hit that like button because it helps the video, it helps the channel, and it helps me right here. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. All right, guys, we got to the end of my June 2024 movie list ranked from worst to best. I love making these, and this series is the longest running series on my channel. I've got them going all the way back to early 2023. So if you want to check out any of the other videos on my channel, well, I've got all of my best and worst movies ranked right there. And I've got all of my 2024 movie reviews right there.